Years ago, I went on a journey to try and discover what was a more scientific model of the vertebral subluxation, a biomechanical model beyond just the four-component system that BJ handed down to us many years ago. And interestingly enough, what I stumbled on in the biomedical journals and textbooks fit pretty well with BJ's model, at least in part, and went, of course, further to describe the mechanisms by which subluxation takes place. It's a little known bit of information. It's very important to chiropractors, but indeed it supports the idea of a misalignment component, a little bit different than the way we imagine it. But I'm just going to walk you through really quickly what the researchers said, and essentially what they discovered. And at first it was just using cadaver specimens of the spine. They were doing typical loading experiments. One of the researchers decided to load the cadaver specimens anterior to the disc center, and as the graph gradually changed with the loading and the segments were going to flexion or lateral flexion or rotation, they heard a sudden cracking noise, and they said the movement spiked, and that spike was only represented by 1 or 2 millimeters of translation or a degree or 2 of rotation. But they said that was a dramatic spike in the usual gradual loading of these specimens. The reason that's interesting is because they then looked at the chart and it went back to typical loading behavior, and the researchers themselves said, but from a new extreme position representing a degree of rotation or a millimeter or 2 of translation, which sounds very much like a vertebral subluxation. Very minute movement in terms of the global movement of the system, but in terms of typical loading behavior, it was dramatic. They studied the tissues, they found no damage to the ligaments, and they were really mystified by this. And then later on, they actually saw it take place under video fluoroscopy with a power lifter, and another set of segments in vivo went into this misalignment pattern. They called it segmental buckling. We call it vertebral subluxation. But it goes a long way to explain to us how subluxations take place, the mechanical mechanism. Remember, BJ said that it was the internal resistance was overcome by external forces, and it essentially the system met its match. There's limitations of matter, and that matter, part of that matter when it comes to the spine is the ligaments themselves, and yet the ligaments are not damaged in these subjects. And so the subluxation, what's often ignored, is in part a soft tissue event. It not only affects nerve tissue, it affects ligaments, it affects the discs, it affects the cartilage, and we see slight asymmetrical loading. They said this model simulated either a single overload event or it was similar to 3 hours of flexion, and they equated that to in a sitting, as you'd see in a sitting position. So again, it lends not only credence to the concepts of vertebral subluxation, but the mechanisms by which they occur.